In a letter to Congress on Saturday, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the Justice Department has released all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. They say fulfilling their obligations under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The letter also outlined its justification for the redactions made in the released files, explaining they were limited to victim privacy, including personally identifiable information and medical details. It also included a list of more than 300, quote, politically exposed people whose names appear in the files in varying contexts. They go from Donald Trump to former President Bill Clinton and other politicians, business people, artists. The update comes days after Bondi faced bipartisan criticism during and after a contentious congressional hearing where she was accused of leading a massive Epstein cover-up. Among those criticizing the DOJ, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, who you saw at the top of the show. He, of course, led the charge to pass the Epstein Files Transparency Act, along with Democrat Ro Khanna. They both said Sunday, Massie said Sunday he's not satisfied with the DOJ's explanation and that he lacks confidence in the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. Watch.
Yesterday, the DOJ sent Congress a letter explaining the reason for all these reactions. So you are not satisfied with that?
No, they're citing deliberative process privilege in order not to release some of the documents. The problem with that is the bill that Ro Khanna and I wrote says that they must release internal memos and notes and emails about their decisions on whether to prosecute or not prosecute, whether to investigate or not investigate.
Do you still have confidence in Pam Bondi as Attorney General?
I don't think Pam Bondi has confidence in Pam Bondi. She wasn't confident enough to engage in anything but name-calling in a hearing. And so, no, I don't have confidence in her.
And importantly, the privilege mechanism that's cited in the DOJ's letter actually isn't in the law as a reason that DOJ can hold back or redact these files. So another turn of the dial to see what Congress might do here. But even as DOJ is stonewalling, there is fallout happening in what I always call the court of public opinion. Among them, veteran Hollywood talent agent Casey Wasserman is selling his agency amid growing controversy over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein and convicted accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Wasserman made the announcement in a memo to staff on Friday. Recently released files by the DOJ include email exchanges from 2003 that the Wall Street Journal describes as, quote, flirtatious between Wasserman and Maxwell. Wasserman told staff he felt he had, quote, become a distraction to the firm's work. The decision to sell his agency also comes after the departure of several high-profile talent from the firm. Wasserman is also chair of the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, and according to the Journal, the committee organizing the games last week voted unanimously to keep him as chair. That's according to people familiar with the situation. We'll stay on fallout for a moment because Chief Legal Officer at Goldman Sachs and former Obama White House counsel Kathy Ruemmler has announced she's leaving that firm. Ruemmler cited media attention over her past correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein, saying it had become a, quote, distraction. We're really leaning on that word here. The DOJ's recent release of Epstein files revealed that Ruemmler exchanged dozens of friendly emails with Epstein over several years, including after his 2008 conviction, calling him, quote, sweetie, Uncle Jeffrey, and writing, quote, well, I adore him. It's like having another older brother. Emails also show Epstein's assistant confirming luxury gifts for Ruemmler, including a designer bag. Ruemmler's spokesperson said the documents are consistent with Ruemmler's longstanding explanation that she knew Epstein through shared legal clients while working as a criminal defense attorney. We're going to keep tracking that story, but also want to turn to the latest overseas. Tons of news happening there, including Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner set to meet tomorrow with Iran's foreign minister in Geneva. The second round of nuclear talks come as President Trump says any agreement must include zero uranium enrichment in Iran. As those talks occur, the United States continues to build up military assets throughout the region. 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford, are being positioned for potential strikes, as well as multiple fighter jets. It comes as the Munich Security Conference was held this weekend, where Secretary of State Marco Rubio skipped a high-level meeting with Ukrainian officials alongside representatives from Poland, Germany, and other countries. Rubio did meet, however, with Zelensky in Munich, but did not join the larger meeting due to scheduling conflicts. After Munich, Rubio traveled first to Slovakia and then Hungary, where he's meeting today with the country's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. At the same time as Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meet with Iranian officials in Switzerland, there will also be more meetings this week between Ukrainian and Russian officials in Geneva. And during the Munich Security Conference, Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina gave a blunt reaction, he's had a lot of those lately, to a comment made by fellow Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. This all on the topic of Greenland and Trump's desire to take over the territory, which is owned by NATO ally Denmark. Take a listen to Graham's initial comment during an interview with Politico at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend. Then we'll give you the response to from Senator Tillis the following day. Watch.
Who gives a shit who owns Greenland? I don't.
I've heard it said by someone that who gives a shit about who owns Greenland? The 55,000 indigenous people of Greenland give a shit about who owns Greenland. And at the end of the day, we need to show them respect.
We'll start there with MS Now international reporter Inez de la Cuetara live with us from Geneva. Inez, as we mentioned, we've seen over the course of the last few days this back and forth on the world stage at Munich. Can you talk a little bit about just the mood on the ground there? Because even Republican officials from Washington overseas now for the conference seem to be in disagreement over recent U.S. foreign policy moves on Greenland, but on other topics as well. So just kind of take us inside what the last few days have been like.
Yeah, Ali, I mean, there were several things happening in Munich. So I think, a big part of the focus was the transatlantic alliance. And we heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio really going out of his way to try and to reassure European allies that the U.S. deeply cares about Europe. I will say comments we heard from the Europeans since then would seem to indicate that they are not necessarily buying it. They remain skeptical. European officials we've been talking to tell us they just don't trust the Trump administration as much as they once did. We heard, for example, from the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, talking about how there are still clearly issues that the U.S. and EU don't see eye to eye on, and she expects that to be the case going forward. We heard from the Danes that they don't think Trump has fully given up on his ambitions to take Greenland. So the transatlantic alliance, very much focus of Munich. And then, of course, yes, there was this kind of parallel delegation. There were lots of Democrats in Munich, kind of Democratic hopefuls for 2028 who were there trying to, hone their foreign policy chops, but also working to reassure allies that, specifically European allies, that basically, I think Gavin Newsom said it best. He said very clearly that Trump is only going to be in power for a few more years, and there will be Europe's allies will still be there even after President Trump's tenure.
And then, of course, you've been making the rounds from Munich now to Geneva. So talk about what you're expecting to be covering today.
Yeah, so the focus now turning to Geneva. We are expecting the U.S. to hold talks on both Iran and Ukraine. When it comes to Iran, we did get a statement from the Iranian foreign minister talking about how these talks would be indirect talks, so similar to what we saw in Oman a few weeks ago when the U.S. and Iran never actually came face to face. Instead, they were meeting with the Omani foreign minister, and we expect the Omanis here to once again mediate those talks. It'll be the special envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner who will be leading the U.S. delegation. On the Iranian side, it'll be the Iranian foreign minister leading that delegation. We just found out moments ago that he met with the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi. Still waiting for a readout on that, but that is significant. And yeah, there are big questions when it comes to Iran as to whether this could be their last chance to really strike a deal, because, of course, there is that second U.S. aircraft carrier that's on the way to the Middle East. President Trump has made it clear that he would not shy away from using force if he needs to. And so, we'll see what comes of that. But we did get a tweet from the Iranian foreign minister today talking about how he wants a fair deal, but he says what is not on the table is submission to threats.
And has taken us around the horn on two major meetings on two major issues happening in Geneva. And of course, all of the news out of Munich. We're going to keep following it throughout the morning. For now, MS Now international reporter Inez de la Cuetara live from Geneva. Thank you.